All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'm just having fun with you.
I know.
Okay. We'll move on to the public forum now. Number 5, pursuant to Rule 25 of the Rules of the Council, citizens may address the town on one subject only, said subject of substantive town business, neither discussed during the regular meeting nor related to personnel or job performance. Citizens may speak for no longer than 5 minutes and must submit a public participation form to the council clerk prior to the start of the meeting. All items discussed during this session will not be voted upon. Do we have any no forms? Okay, excellent. Let's move on to number 6, the town business update. Number 6, memorandum of town administrator in reference to town business updates for July.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
Motion is second to receive. All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Sean's not here. I really don't want to put Ron on the spot. I'm sure he's prepared, but we all have it. We read it. Do you want him to go over it or use?
No.
Dennis?
I'm good.
You good? Okay.
I have
Awesome.
one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed, Ron, that the FLUP, which we approved for advertising.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear Terry.
The FLUP map that the council approved for advertising did not have a date or an estimated time frame for the actual public hearing. The other ones seemed to. Do you have any idea when that might occur?
We're working with the clerk to get the advertising together. I'm not sure if we have a date identified yet.
We do not have a date identified yet. We don't have a date identified yet. We're going through all the ordinances so that we can have like one a month.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I do have one thing.
Yes, Councilor Toronto.
In regards to notifying people on the short-term rental meetings that are coming up, I know that we advertised it, we put it out there, but it seems like there's a misconnect a little bit with the group of folks that were on the committee for short-term rentals. And so when we advertise the next one, can we send something to the people that were on the committee, or to Strom, or to these groups? Or, I mean, what's the thought there?
Well, I don't think we should treat any committee
No.
different than any other
No.
committee.
No.
Because they're all advertised the same way, they're all done consistently.
And they're on the
I
web.
read the email that we got.
And
I
they're on the
totally
web.
disagree with it. I'm sorry that that person wasn't notified of it, but we can't just start sending special, notifications. That's the purpose of the opens meetings, and,
And it is on
I
the
mean,
web.
it's on the website, it's on the state website.
Yeah.
We do it the same for every committee. I think we're opening a door that there's no turning back to.
I think we have the ability, though, that where people can actually add their name to a list, or they can, I guess they can go to the calendar and actually select the meeting, and then there'll be, I think, any other meeting associated to that would then give them an alert.
Yes, that's
So maybe we can
correct.
explain that to the public on how that works. So
Yes,
that-
you can do that, and I know Sean replied to that email with those instructions that you can set yourself up so that any other time of meeting of that particular committee is posted, that you'll get a notification. So, and I don't,
Yeah, I think
I don't know
that's
whether,
fine.
I don't know whether that is, those instructions are on the town website, but maybe that's something that
Yeah, I have no
administration
issue with
could look
that, but I don't
into.
think we should treat one committee different than any other committee,
Okay, sounds good.
okay? Well, I think it's a good idea if those instructions are there so that people could, like when you do any type of, you're looking at reporting or whatever, you can, certain reports, you can pull up as a PDF file and have them sent to your email as a notification on every day, every Monday or whatever, so, okay? So let's move on to the consent calendar. And Ron, thank you for that awesome update. Does any councilors like to take any items off the consent? Okay.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Licenses and permits. Number 12, application for special event permit for Justin Spiegel, Amp Surf, for surf therapy for people with disabilities, to be held at Second Beach on Monday, September 20th, 2021, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Attached is the request to waive the permit fees.
Motion to grant said special event permit and waive all fees.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I have a
All,
question.
Councilor Welch.
Didn't they do 2 of these? Is this the third one?
I think it's somebody different.
I'm pretty sure it was.
It's a third one?
The third one.
Okay.
Okay.
because it's not the same name.
AMP is the same.
Oh, it was the Gnome Surf, it was the Gnome Surf one out of Little Compton. That's what I'm confused with. That's right. All right, you're right, Tom. Okay. Any further questions? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, number 13, application of Newport Chowder Company LLC, Newport, Rhode Island, for a mobile food establishment license truck for the 2021-2022 licensing year.
Motion to grant said license.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to grant said license. Discussion.
Can you come down Tuckerman Ave?
No. No, they have to stay within the truck food areas that they're required to be able to grant that license,
Oh,
so.
it's kind of like ice cream.
Huh?
It's
You
kinda
want to
like
make a
ice cream.
chowder exception? Okay,
Question?
yes.
I notice, Madam Clerk, that this is for the same company. They're getting a truck permit and a cart permit.
Correct.
And do you know where that stands with our count for those? Because we do have maximums. And I'm sorry, I did not,
The truck, I want to say, is number 9.
out of,
This is only like 3 for the cart.
okay. And do you know what our ceiling is on those numbers off the top of your head?
10 for the
I thought it was
trucks
10 for trucks.
and 7 for carts.
7 for carts.
Okay, so, thank you. So we know where we're at.
Okay. All right, so, we have a motion and a second to grant said license. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Number 14, application of Newport Chowder Company LLC, Newport, Rhode Island, for a mobile food establishment license, and this is for the cart for the 2021-2022 licensing year.
Motion to grant said license.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to grant said license. Any further discussion?
Yes, please.
Mrs. Santos?
What is the jurisdiction on the carts?
Same.
Same as the truck? Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, let's move on to the public hearing. Number 15, public hearing advertised in ordinance to the town of Middletown, first reading. An ordinance and amendment to the town code of the town of Middletown, Title 15, Land Use, Chapter 152 Zoning Code is amended by adding new section 727 marijuana-related uses. Planning Board recommendation is on file.
Motion to open said public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to the solicitor. I believe he's the fine gentleman that drafted this ordinance. And again, it's the first reading, you know, so we can, you know, consider any tweaks or you know, take stuff out or add stuff, whatever the council wants to do based upon the input we hear from our residents. So, Mr. Regan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just by way of background, this process started probably about a year and a half ago when there was, in anticipation that the General Assembly might pass legislation authorizing the sale of recreational marijuana in addition to the current medical marijuana program. And so the Planning Board, working with Ron and the Planning Department, my office, as well as a consultant, Dwight Miriam, set up a subcommittee that met over a number of months to put a draft together. During that process, the Department of Business Regulation also adopted and updated new regulations with regard to medical marijuana, so those were incorporated into the draft ordinance. That eventually made its way to the full planning board. Full planning board held public hearings on it, and the result of that process is what's in front of the council this evening. Just at the outset, I want to make it clear, this deals with marijuana, cannabis only. It does not deal with hemp. Hemp is a different product altogether, and there are a whole separate set of regulations at the state level with regard to farming hemp. So this has no relation to that. This simply deals with medical marijuana as it currently exists under state law and provisions related to recreational and retail sale of marijuana in the event that the General Assembly proceeds with that. So that's by way of background. If we go to the next slide, please. Actually, 2 slides up, please. So when we talk about marijuana-related uses, one of the first things the committee did was take a look at, was there any space for local regulation when it came to medical marijuana and recreational marijuana? When we took a look at both the prior and revised regulations from DBR, the main area where we would have some amount of control was zoning. In terms of things like licensing, purely going to be done at the state level, so whether it's a compassion center, a retail operation, a commercial cultivation, a small personal cultivation, that's all going to be dealt with at the state level. The one area where we do have some room based on the regulations is zoning. So we looked at marijuana-related uses the same way we did any other uses that might be in town, and where is an appropriate zone, and what would the potential impacts of those uses be on abutting properties, depending upon what zone it's in. And when we talk about marijuana-related uses, we're really talking about 2 things. Uses that are allowed under state law right now, which is primarily medical marijuana, and then trying to anticipate the uses that would be permitted in the event that recreational marijuana passes at the state level. In terms of those uses, on one side, we've got things like compassion centers, similar to what's up in Portsmouth, a dispensary for medical marijuana. And then if it passes, retail operations where it would be the sale of recreational marijuana at a retail level. On the other side of the spectrum, we've got, under current law, personal cultivation. So someone that has a medical marijuana card and is allowed under state law to grow a small amount of marijuana for their own personal use. Someone who is licensed as a caregiver can grow a small amount of marijuana for the people that they care for. And we have personal cooperative cultivation, which is when a couple of individuals get together and grow a small amount on their own. In the middle of those 2 sides of the spectrum, we've also got commercial cultivation, so it would be larger scale commercial operations, and all cultivation of marijuana is indoors and regulated by the state, and testing facilities. So there are labs that test marijuana, just like you have labs that test food and other things, to make sure that whatever is being sold through compassion centers or other outlets meets all the safety guidelines that the state has set. So in taking a look first at more of the retail uses, compassion centers and marijuana emporiums or marijuana stores, the planning board looked, first at what was going on in Massachusetts, which recently opened up recreational marijuana, and looked at some of the issues and problems that were being encountered right across the border in terms of traffic, in terms of congestion, noise, and other issues, and came to the determination that they didn't think that there was any appropriate area in town for a compassion center or for retail operations. So this draft that's been prepared by the planning board would prohibit those uses throughout the town in any zoning district. With regard to cultivation, and we've got some maps that will show these things as we go through the presentation. Cultivation, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So compassion centers and retail outlets would be prohibited in all districts. Cultivation centers, that is commercial cultivation, would be permitted only in the light industrial districts after obtaining a special use permit from the zoning board. And as we go through this, would have to meet a number of standards with regard to security, lighting, odor control, et cetera. Marijuana testing providers, these labs that test the safety of the product, would be permitted only in the office park district, once again by special use permit. And you'll see when we get into this, each of these uses has specific setbacks from schools, from places such as daycare centers where young people will congregate, and also from residential uses in residential zoning districts. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, for example, cultivation centers would be required to be at least 100 feet from any residential district, or 200 feet from any church, daycare, park, or ball field, or place where minors congregate, and 1,000 feet from any public or private school. Testing providers, once again, these are small labs, 100 feet from any residential district or use, 200 feet from a church, school, daycare, park, field, or place where minors congregate. And all of these uses would have very specific requirements with regard to security, with regard to lighting, with regard to surveillance, with regard to signage, et cetera. And that's one of the things we had our consultant, Dwight Merriam, who's an attorney from Connecticut, who is one of the leading experts in the country on this sort of thing, help us put together those provisions. And if you take a look through the draft ordinance, you'll see that there's very detailed provisions with regard to things like odor control, et cetera. So this is a very comprehensive ordinance that we would have here if it's passed. Next slide, please. So this map, and Ron can jump in here if I get this incorrect. This map essentially shows the allowable areas where a commercial cultivation center would be permitted. And so that's limited to the light industrial district. And then if you take into account the required setbacks from residential properties, residential districts, schools, et cetera, it's the area in green. You can see a pretty large portion of that is the airport. And so, you know, it wouldn't be prohibited outright, but there are, you know, some small areas in town where that use would be allowed. One of the things we did talk about, I'm not sure that Middletown is a particularly advantageous place for commercial cultivation, because what you see, generally speaking, are these operations taking place in large vacant buildings or old mills that are rehabbed for that purpose. And given that we don't have many of those structures here, and the high cost of land in Middletown compared to some other parts of the state, I don't see a huge amount of people rushing to try to put these facilities in town. But as you can see, there'd be some small areas that would be available for that use if that was the case. Next slide, please. This next shows basically the area of the corporate park, and the area that is in the light purple is the areas that would be available with approval from the zoning board, a special use permit for marijuana testing facilities. And you can see that there are areas of the corporate park that would not be allowed. Those are areas that are around things like the YMCA and Child and Family Services because of the required setback from those uses. Next slide, please. In terms of the requirements, as I said, there are lighting requirements, there are extensive odor control requirements, because one of the things that the committee did spend a good deal of time was looking at what are the potential adverse impacts from these particular types of uses, and what have we seen in the problems that might have come up in other communities where these sorts of uses were there. So there is extensive odor control requirements in the ordinance. The technology now over the last several years has improved on that, so it's not as big a problem, and Ron did some research on this, as it might have been 5 or 6 years ago in some communities. And then there's also, you know, parking and requirements with regard to that. Next slide, please. When it comes to individual patient cultivation, this is the area where we're least limited, or most limited, excuse me, in terms of what we can regulate, because the statute is very clear that someone who has a medical marijuana card does have the right to grow the small amount of marijuana that they're allowed to by state law in all zoning districts, so residential or otherwise. Our ordinance would say that it's only at the cardholder's primary residence. Approval of the property owner would be required if it's a rental property. And the person doing the cultivation would have to meet all the state and local requirements in terms of fire code, electric code, et cetera, because that's also one of the areas we don't want somebody burning down a house because of the facilities that they're using to cultivate. Same thing with caregiver cultivation. Under state law, it's allowed in all zoning districts, subject to getting the proper applicable state and local permits. Residential, the next slide is residential cooperative cultivation. This is, once again, individuals, but it's a slightly larger, it's not a commercial operation, but it's a number of individuals growing together. This would require a special use permit in all residential districts. It would have to be 500 feet from a church, school, et cetera, and only one cultivation per location with property owner approval and state and local inspections and permits required. And lastly, on the next slide, non-residential cooperative cultivation. Once again, this isn't full-scale commercial operation, but it is cultivation for medical use only by 2 or more card holders that's in a non-residential facility. That would only be allowed in the light industrial district, once again with a special use permit from the zoning board, and with at least 500 feet of distance from a church, school, preschool, daycare, et cetera. And the next slide is just a recap of the amendments to the use tables of the zoning code that would show what uses are allowed, what uses are prohibited, what uses are allowed by special use permit, and the applicable zones in which they could be operated. So just to do a bit of a quick recap here, once again, I think that the planning board and the committee felt that having compassion centers or retail outlets for the sale of marijuana in Middletown based on the issues and problems being encountered with those facilities in Massachusetts, that those should be prohibited in town, that cultivation centers be allowed, but only in the light industrial district with the zoning approval and with very strict guidelines in terms of odor, security, et cetera. The same with testing facilities, although those would only be allowed in the office park. And then patient cultivation, as required by state law, would be allowed in all residential districts and commercial districts as well. And once again, the intent here is not to prohibit card holders from growing the medicine that they need, but simply make sure that whatever marijuana-related uses we have here aren't causing adverse impacts in the town. Just one last thing, there were a number of bills that had been presented in the General Assembly this year with regard to the sale of recreational marijuana. That session ended without any of those being passed. We certainly expect that those will be reintroduced in the next session. And one of the key things that we are looking at is, if it does pass, what are the opt-out provisions for cities and towns to say these uses are allowed in our town and these uses aren't. It is the position of the League and Cities and Towns that that decision to opt out on any particular use should be made at the city or town council level. Most of the bills that had been presented in the legislature, on the other hand, required a special election or a referendum. And it would have to be a separate referendum for each particular use that would be allowed. We don't know where that's going to come out, and so we have a good, well thought out, I think, comprehensive ordinance here. If legislation approving recreational marijuana is passed, it is likely that some provision of that ordinance might need to be changed, particularly with regard to opt-outs. and prohibiting certain uses. However, I think the town would be in a much better position having that full framework in place when that happens, and be able to sort of pivot quickly to make any revisions that might be necessary than trying to start from scratch and move forward. And I think this also, just from, you know, the standpoint of any business operators that are looking to locate in certain parts of the state, I think it's helpful to the town to let people know what we want and don't want here, so that people aren't maybe looking at us as being if it's the council's decision, not looking at us being a particularly marijuana-friendly business environment. But once again, that's a decision that you'll have to make. But I think even though we may need to change some of this, if new state legislation comes out, I think we'll be far ahead of the game having something, a framework like this in place.
Okay, Peter, thank you. That may be the longest that I've ever heard you speak,
It's okay.
but, yeah. That's good. So, good job. It's a public hearing, so are there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Carol? I knew you'd be here tonight.
Saying that to me. Good evening, my name is Carol
If you could just
Formica.
pull the mic down so we could pull the microphone down so we could hear you, Carol, please.
Is that better?
Just talk as loud as you can.
My name is Carol Formica. Address is 21 Mass Court, Middletown. I've participated in another public forum on this ordinance. So I know you all know that for at least 10 years I've been fighting marijuana legalization for a number of reasons, particularly negative societal impacts, especially on our youth. With regards to this ordinance, looking at what it was saying in the paper, it states this ordinance is to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare of all residents and visitors by ensuring that marijuana-related businesses are located and operated in a manner that minimizes any adverse impacts. And on the ordinance, it states specifically on page 2 that marijuana-related businesses, including cultivation facilities, manufacturing facilities, testing facilities, compassion centers, and retail stores, have serious adverse secondary impacts. These secondary impacts, which pose a threat to the public's health, safety, and general welfare, include increased crime, illegal sales of marijuana to and use of marijuana by minors and others without medical need, the use of marijuana in public areas, and adverse impacts on neighboring businesses and properties, including odor complaints, traffic, and decreased property values. Yet, in my opinion, the rest of the ordinance is incongruent with this statement. If you really want to protect our neighborhoods, our families, our communities, and especially our youth, in my opinion, it should be 0 marijuana-related businesses. Because as soon as you open the door to one, guess what's going to happen? Retail's going to follow, just like the medical marijuana, the same thing that happened with medical marijuana. So that's why I wanted to bring this up tonight. I don't believe it's a good thing. My other question was, in the ordinance, in the original ordinance, it had said that 1,000 feet from residential zoning, any cultivation centers or testing sites, and 1,500 feet from schools, parks, and churches. So how does 500 feet deem more protective than 1,000 or 1,500 feet? So that's one question. My other question in reading what was in the paper was, I was a little confused. You were talking about the zoning certificates and the fire, I guess the fire inspections and so forth, but it goes to state that certificate, fire inspections, and building trade permits are not required for cardholders cultivating marijuana by natural means. So I wonder why there's an exception there, and if someone could explain that to me. So those are the two questions.
Okay.
I can answer so the last one first is that's in line with the regulations that were adopted by the Department of Business Regulation.
Okay.
And as I said earlier, there's less regulation of that individual personal cultivation, obviously, than there is on the more larger commercial scale businesses. With regard to the distances or setbacks for things like cultivation centers and testing facilities, when we originally drafted that ordinance, one of the things we did was, Ron and Rita in the planning department looked at the town map and said, okay, if these are the setbacks we're using, what areas of the town would then be available for these uses? And when we looked at the map, the entire map was gone. We were de facto prohibiting them. So
What's wrong with that?
well, once again, that's a decision that the council has to make. The approach that the planning board took was they looked at each use separately and looked at what were the potential adverse impacts. So, for example, from cultivation, one of the things they looked at, it was security, it was odor control. They try to look and research what the adverse impacts from each of those different types of businesses had been in other communities and how they could be addressed. I think they came to the conclusion that we couldn't adequately address the adverse impacts of the retail sale of marijuana, and therefore that was prohibited. They felt that on some of these other uses, like, for example, a testing facility, a small lab, any adverse impacts could be mitigated so that it wouldn't have an adverse impact on neighboring properties, provided that it met the setbacks, the security, and all these other requirements. So you see that we still have very small areas in town at which those uses might be allowed. And once again, I'm not arguing for it one way or the other, but that's why the setbacks were changed, because we took the position, well, if we're going to prohibit it, then just outright prohibit it. Don't create a map that doesn't have any space left on it for them to operate.
Okay, then I'm going to address this next question to you because you're the person I guess I should ask.
You have to address the council.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
My apologies. My next question would be, I thought it was one testing site, but according to the paper, they're saying 3 testing providers.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure I
that's-
understand the question.
It says 2 marijuana cultivation centers, and then it goes on to say 3 marijuana testing providers are permitted? Or is that, were you numbering things in the, maybe I'm reading it wrong?
Yeah, we didn't specify a specific number
Numbers, no.
of those types of businesses that would be allowed, and the number of facilities that would be licensed throughout the state is determined by the state.
Okay, so my last statement to the whole council, again, I apologize, I know I should have addressed you.
It's okay, no
Yes.
worries, Carol.
The issues that mostly I'm concerned with when we talk about marijuana is increased youth use, which also includes addiction and suicide, unintentional pediatric exposures, indoor marijuana cultivation hazards, including the carbon footprint it leaves, Rhode Island crime and environmental hazards, Rhode Island employer issues, and mostly our youth. That's my first priority, so that's what I'm going to leave you with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? Mr. Viveras?
Thank you, Mr. President. Anton Viveras, 1 Admiralty Drive, Apartment 11, Middletown. I have just looked up, it's an article written by Quentin James and John Carrier Kinglock on subject of marijuana, and it states, "No one has ever died from smoking marijuana" is a very common phrase when someone is defending marijuana use. It is proven that regular marijuana use is associated with long-term problems, including poor academic performance, memory loss, and lung cancer. To a developing brain like those of teenagers, marijuana can be especially toxic. Using marijuana can lead to panic attacks, depression, and other mental health problems, not to mention increased anxiety. Ever since medical and recreational use of marijuana laws were passed, society's perception of harm regarding the drug has greatly diminished. Unfortunately, most people don't know about the myth and facts of marijuana, the effect it has on youth and adults, the most of all, the laws associated with marijuana. Marijuana and a healthy, active lifestyle do not mix. Using marijuana can hurt your health and affect how well you do in sports, how you sleep and eat, and how your brain develops. And they give you some examples, but I won't go into that. It's just a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Viveras. Anyone else like to speak on this, on the public hearing on marijuana? No? Any councils have any questions on the draft of the ordinance? Council Flynn?
I think Counselor Welch actually had his hand up
You
first.
beat him, go ahead.
I beat him.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify with the solicitor that the patient cultivation and the caregiver cultivation, is it by state law or federal law that in the uses table that across the board, those are required to be allowed?
Yes, under the state law, the Edward Hawkins and Thomas Slater Medical and Marijuana Act, that use is allowed in all zoning districts. So we do not have the ability to prohibit it.
Okay. Second part of the same question on uses, my apologies, Counselor Welch, is we did get an email from a farmer who was not so much concerned for their consideration, but perhaps in subsequent generations to be able to produce and grow and utilize the farm growing marijuana. And I'm not sure where our uses, do we account for that anywhere in our uses table?
For what?
It wouldn't be grown outside. It's not allowed to be grown outside.
Yeah,
And
so
that's
there's-
why I had Peter before address the marijuana versus hemp uses.
Yeah, it's
Because
a-
hemp would have to be grown outside if it was allowed. Marijuana, this ordinance specifically, sorry, Peter, I'm
No, no,
I
it's-
feel-
No, you're-
I'm
that's
feeling
fine.
kind of solicitor, so, that it would have to be grown specifically inside, nothing outside.
So it's not an option at all. Is it an option anywhere to be grown outside?
Hemp? Yeah.
No, not hemp, marijuana.
No.
It is not.
It cannot be grown. I mean, and it makes sense when you think about from a security standpoint. But from a state regulation standpoint, it has to be grown in an indoor secure facility.
Does that mirror other states' position?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Counselor Welch?
Silly question, but I don't know the difference between marijuana and hemp.
Hemp is, I mean, they are related. Hemp is as I understand it, more of an industrial product and used to make rope and other things. And lately, I think when you see things like, and I'm going to give the wrong letters, CBG oil or something of that sort that is sold but doesn't contain THC, and that's the difference. The plant doesn't contain THC. Those oils are derived from hemp. So there is some benefit to farmers growing that because they can then sell it to pharmaceutical companies who are developing products from it. But
So
there's
that-
DBR has a whole separate set of regulations with regard to growing hemp.
So they're
And
two
it needs to be
totally
licensed at the
separate
state level.
plants.
Totally separate plants, totally, so this would not impact the ability of someone to farm hemp.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Do you have a question?
No, I just said
Okay.
that was a good question because I didn't know the difference.
Yeah. I knew the difference only because a year or two ago, so, I deserve it.
You do.
A resident had sent me an article saying, hey, you have a bunch of farmland, you should grow hemp. And I had no idea what hemp even was. And so I said, well, what is that? And they said, same thing you just said. But it also has an odor.
It does.
So, but that can't, so how about a farmer that, say, you know, they'd have to play by the same rules, right, on this ordinance, and they're not, say they put up a building on their property. Say the nursery or some large landowner put up a building on this and grew it inside. Is there a difference for farmers versus any other type of cultivator?
No.
Or they have to be in
But
the same, do they have to be in the same?
They have to be in the same,
Zoning?
follow the same zoning
Okay.
regulations and grow in the light industrial district. And from what we've seen, this is not, as opposed to hemp, these facilities are not things that are undertaken by traditional farmers. These are commercial, well-funded commercial enterprises that are specifically geared towards cultivating marijuana indoors with very high-tech methods.
Yeah, you just gotta ask the question though, Peter, because, you know, look at the evolution of farming and what it's evolving to and the different uses that, and the different types of farms now.
Yep.
Farms traditionally were, you know, cows and all kinds of stuff, but it's, you know, it's evolved to the, you know, Sweetberry Farms and, you know, those types of farms of the world, so, or Middletown, so, good question. So,
I have one
Councilor
more.
Welch.
Peter, so the allowable area for cultivation centers, other than the airport, is that Skater Island?
Yep.
So, just asking, why wouldn't we tweak those numbers a little bit to erase that block?
You know, once again, I think if we're going to allow that particular use, I think you have to create some area where it can actually be located. If the idea is we don't want that use here, then I think you would just, the better approach would be to prohibit it. But,
Okay.
you know, once again, it's up to.
So
it's up
those
to
are
the
really
council.
only, really the light industrial, there's not a lot of light industrial zoned areas,
No.
and that's what.
No.
That's what,
And-
No, I
And once
understand
again,
the setback.
one of the things that the committee looked at and the planning board looked at, based on the research that was done, is there've been, the big issue with regard to cultivation, beyond making sure it's a secure facility, has been odor. And there've been a lot of progress in odor control technology for these facilities over the last several years, and I think it was Ron actually contacted communities where they have these facilities to see what sort of issues they had, and they're really, from an odor standpoint, there really weren't any based on the new technology.
One more thing.
yes, sir.
So Lori Verderosa from the Prevention Coalition wanted to speak tonight on this, obviously. So she emailed, and I said I would read it just short. As you are aware, the public hearing to amend Middletown zoning ordinance related to marijuana uses is being held at this meeting. I unfortunately have a scheduling conflict. I wanted to inform you of such, since this public hearing regarding marijuana land use zoning amendments is of such relevance and importance to the mission of the coalition. Please be informed that I will be speaking at the public hearing on September 7th, 2021. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Flynn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I was also concerned, along with Ms. Formica, with the distances that were laid out in the ordinance. And I am also concerned, as I know that parcels also change zoning. So all of a sudden, what might be in a spot that's prohibited now, because other than that, those lines that the state has mandated we must allow it, it's all prohibited except where it's by special use. But a parcel could be prohibited today and perhaps a special use in another year as zoning is changed, you know, by request or design. So I look at the distances that seem very low from, you know, populations that might be at risk, and the fact that zoning does change for parcels. And I'm just wondering if it would not have been, and maybe this isn't allowed, to simply identify the parcels where the town prefers this activity to take place.
You could identify the parcels, but you also still want to maintain setbacks because I have a parcel and I'm where the use is located on that particular parcel, particularly if it's a large one, it might have more or less impact. So keeping those things in, and this is something Ron can back up. The committee spent a lot of time, and we went through I don't know how many iterations of this map, trying to come up with something that that was reasonable, that was consistent with what other communities had done, was consistent with the potential impacts. But certainly, I mean, these things can be tweaked, but every tweak you make, you got to take a look at the map because, once again, if the distances are so large that there's really no area left to put that use, then, you know, it's a de facto prohibition, and you might as well just say it's prohibited. Now, and the other thing too is if the state passes recreational marijuana and the opt-out has to be to prohibit uses has to be by referendum or special election, we do want to make sure that we have something in place that limits those uses to a particular zone. Because if all of a sudden there's a special election and the result is that use is now allowed, we don't want it to be allowed everywhere. We want to make sure that from a zoning standpoint, we've at least limited its application to where it's going to have the least amount of impact.
So if you identified the parcels that the town thinks is appropriate to have this activity, and you set your distances, you know, so that you would not, you know, de facto prohibit them on those parcels that you've already identified, wouldn't that be a more secure way to make sure you know exactly where the activity will be taking place, as opposed to just a zoning description, which could open it up down the line?
Well, I certainly will take a look at that, but that, you know, in terms of regulating the uses, it really needs to be regulated by zoning district, whether it's allowed, prohibited, requires special use permit, because once again, if that parcel, if the zoning designation of that particular parcel changes, the use, if I'm identifying it by parcel, the use would still be allowed. So if it goes from light industrial to residential, it would still be allowed, and that would end up also being an approach that's inconsistent with how we zone all the other uses in the ordinance. So I certainly would take a look at it and get back to you on it, but
if it did change, would it not fall under what is allowed on the uses table for that zoning designation? Then, like, the whole use would switch if the parcel switched to, you know, from one that is, you know, special use to prohibited. It can't carry the special use over in the new zoning. It would have to be then prohibited.
my assumption, the designation of for example, the light industrial zone, the designation of the property in that zone is not going to change unless the council changes it. Okay, that, you know, rezoning has to be done by the council, and my assumption is, if you were going to rezone that area, or make it larger or make it smaller, that the council would take these sorts of impacts into account at the time you do it.
On the other hand, an owner could be zoned something that's prohibited, say, you know, marijuana cultivation center that's in a limited business parcel perhaps, and then appeal to be light industrial where it's special use. And then
They could ask to be light industrial, but it would be up to the council to approve that, and if the council says no, then, you know, and once again, my assumption is, and when the council rezones property, one of the things is, as you know, based on some recent rezonings, the council can limit the uses that are allowed in that newly rezoned area. So, for example, the Polo Center was one where it was rezoned, a portion of it from residential to limited business, but there were only specific uses within the limited business district that were allowed on that particular property. So once again, in terms of rezoning and what's allowed after something's rezoned, the council has control over how to make sure there's not an adverse impact there.
I just didn't know if it would be more, if the town would be more protected doing it by parcel identification as opposed to zoning
Yeah,
identification.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Anyone else in the public like to speak on this? Okay, it's the first hearing. We'll have at it again for a second hearing on September 7th. So, Mr. Welch.
Motion to receive said ordinance on its first reading.
Second?
Wendy?
Do you want to announce that you're going to?
Yeah, the public hearing will remain open. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. So we have a motion to receive said ordinance on its first reading. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, so again, you'll have a second crack at it on September 7th. And, if more people show up and we're not satisfied, we'll keep going. I mean, that's what we have to do. We have to listen and do what we think is best based on the facts we have, okay? Let's go to number 16, ordinance, Town of Middletown, second reading, an ordinance and amendment to the Town Code of the Town of Middletown, Title III, Administration, Chapter 36, Fee Schedule, F, Police, 4, Public Safety, Private Detail Billing Rates, Police Department.
Motion to adopt said ordinance on its second reading.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance in its second reading. Are there any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's go to other communications. Number 17, email communication of Simon Cousins, Island Elements, Island Surf and Sports, Elemental Surf and Skate, in reference to Third Beach concession agreement.
Motion to continue this item to the September 7th, 2021 regular meeting of the council.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to continue this item to September 7th, regular meeting of the council. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Number 18, email communication of Mercina Christopher in reference to objecting to allowing pets in the cemetery and requesting the town council to change the rule.
Motion to receive said email communication.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive this. Is there any discussion on it? Mrs. Flynn?
I think it's been submitted for us to discuss. Is that something maybe the solicitor would know that is something that can be prohibited in cemeteries? Do people do that, or do towns prohibit dogs, pets from cemeteries?
It is not an area that I'm generally familiar with, but
I'm surprised.
certainly could take a look at. I mean, I think it's one that's within the discretion of the council.
So, go ahead, Wendy.
When we were preparing these rules, we had looked at other cities and towns, and that's how we came up with these rules. We do have signs up there asking people to keep their dogs on a leash.
So when I read this, one of the questions that came to my mind was, I immediately said, yeah, she's right. And then as I thought about it, well, some people are very attached to their pets, some people that, consider the pets their children. Maybe somebody that passed away and they're bringing their dog or their pet to visit the person. I mean, those kind of things go on. So I think the current rules are there's no leash. There's the sign there. Do we have any type of doggy bags there or anything like that to be able, because I thought immediately of, you don't want a dog defecating on a grave if possible. That would irritate probably most people, or any kind of pet. So maybe we could add that out there. I don't know, as an extra. I don't know. Any thoughts, Council Welch?
I don't agree, because I think the responsible pet owner, if you're bringing it literally to see a grave, it should be on a leash and you should pick up after them. If you put a bag dispenser there, I think you're advertising. In fact, you can come let your dog off.
Okay.
I wouldn't do it.
Fair
And
enough.
then you're gonna end up with them on the ground.
Fair enough.
I agree.
Any further discussion? Comments? Okay. So everyone's comfortable with the current rules and the way it sits? Mrs. Flynn?
I guess I would just say that, duly noted on this, but if we hear more of the same, something needs to be done.
From the same person?
No, from other
Okay.
people, from other
Okay.
people. If it's,
Yep.
I think that's fair, and
Okay.
so long it's
Sure. I mean, that's,
on our radar.
yeah, I mean, as long as I've sat here, it's the first time I've ever heard of it.
It's like the relief at the golf course. If we hear more of it, it's
Okay.
something that needs to be addressed.
Mrs. Santos?
I agree with not letting a dog out loose out on the cemetery. I've gone to the cemetery when I had my boxes, but they stayed in the vehicle while I visited my mother and father's sister's grave and my husband's. They stayed in the car. They were not let loose. So I think that one or two things. By letting a dog loose, you're not complying with our law that dogs have to be on a leash. Now, if a dog is on a leash and the person is going to visit a family gravesite, they should have the dog on the leash and certainly pick up if the dog does anything on the ground. They can bring their own bags to give it. We shouldn't supply the bags.
It was just a suggestion.
Okay,
You don't have to get mad at me.
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Then duly noted. Okay? All right. We have a motion to receive the said communication. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Number 19, communication of J. Clement Bud Cicilline, First Vice President and Co-Chair NAACP, Newport County Branch Golf Tournament Committee, in reference to requests for support by sponsoring a T sign for the golf tournament.
Motion to receive said communication and authorize $150 for a golf tee to be allocated from the town council president's discretionary fund.
Second?
The motion is second to authorize $150 golf tee to be allocated from the council president's discretionary fund. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Number 20, communication of Henry P. Sorrett, Esquire, Newport, in reference to Third Beach access.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second to receive said communication. Discussion. Any comments? Mrs. Flynn?
Comment, this may be something to forward to our beach commission to have a conversation about, perhaps?
Okay, so, yeah, that's fine. One of the things that, I didn't talk to Sean about this one specifically, but I had received an email, I think we all did it, a while back, from a gentleman, and Sean had contacted him or for his wife, actually, and they were, I don't know if they were a Portsmouth resident or a Newport resident, but he does make exceptions for people with any type of disability or handicap to access the beach. As long as it's legitimate, and, they prove that, obviously, but Third Beach, because it's very accessible. People that have that disability are able to get down there fairly easy compared to Second Beach. We don't have to go over the mats and the dunes to get in. So I think he's been reasonable with that. It's only been one or two here or there, from my understanding. So, and I know that this is something similar here, but we just need to be careful, because we need to, at least just my opinion, is that we reserved Third Beach specifically for our residents. And if we can give our residents something specifically, I know we took a little heat over it from people that aren't in Middletown, islanders, whether it's, people from Portsmouth or Newport, but at the end of the day, the residents pay the taxes and pay the bills. So if we can give them something extra, I think that's what we decided. COVID kind of brought that to light. We probably never would have done it if that didn't happen, and once we did it, we realized, hey, we can continue to do this exclusively for Third Beach because, you know, we don't have to, we're not under that rule of the federal money that was borrowed for parts of Second Beach. So I think we just leave it up to Sean operationally. He can make those decisions, and that's what he gets paid to do.
So this family who wrote in addressed it to the council.
Yep.
Should they perhaps give our town administrator a call then if they want to pursue the
I
conversation?
can give him the 849-2898 number.
Very good.
It'll be
President?
Mrs. Santos.
Does that also, refresh my memory, does that also pertain to the Navy lot?
That does. That is
Okay,
exclusive
I
to
thought so.
Middletown
Thank you.
residents.
I
Yes,
thought
ma'am.
so.
Okay.
And is this something that the Beach Commission, does the council feel that they should have a conversation about these
No,
inquiries?
Dr.
Because they do
Sean.
come in. We got a lot of emails from people in other communities on Aquidneck Island that used to live in Middletown, or they have family in Middletown, and now they don't get to go to Third Beach, so.
Well, the way I look, and I understand, the way they could look at it is if their family in Middletown has a sticker, use the family in Middletown's vehicle or go with them.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, I'll tell you, I've gotten nothing but positive feedback about nobody waiting in line, residents, you know, I mean, it's just been fantastic feedback, and, you know, they pay the bills, and
no argument, just wanted to make sure there was no additional conversation
Okay.
from our Beach Commission
Okay.
requested.
thank you. Okay.
Let's move on.
I do want to say before I move on, I know we're getting to the latter part of the meeting, Ron, and I failed you by not saying that you were filling in for Sean as the acting town administrator, and thank
Halfway-
you.
Halfway through the
It
council.
doesn't matter, I'm still doing it. I apologize for the lateness
Can I
of it.
take 'em?
So I just wanted to recognize you and thank you for your preparation and filling in for Sean tonight. Thank you. Let's get on to town council. Number 21, communication of Council of Toronto, reference to Middletown School Maintenance Department, IT Department, and the Accounting Department merge with the Middletown DPW, IT Department, and Accounting
Can
Department.
we finish the motion from number 20?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to receive said communication.
We already did that one.
In the second, we had the second.
We had a second, we
Needed
just,
to vote.
I forgot what to say, all in favor.
Yeah, so we did that, and then I finished where you just stopped.
Oh, I apologize, sir.
Jesus.
Motion to receive said communication, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Council of Toronto.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess we're going to have to make a motion to table this till Sean comes back, because he's kind of the point person who would be giving us an update on this.
Yeah, so Ron, do you have any update on this or no?
No, I talked to Sean briefly about it, and he suggested that he'd be more prepared at the next meeting to address that.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. So a motion is second to continue. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Wendy, that'll be on the next docket. Okay. Number 22, communication of Council of Toronto, reference to Middletown property tax assessment.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, Dennis had called me, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago and asked me, you know, you think there's any appetite for the council to take a look at this again? And, you know, one of the things you have to do, in fairness to your colleagues, is when there's requests, unless they're unreasonable, is look, the council president controls what's on the docket, but we're all councilors, we all have equal say, we all have equal voting privileges and rights, and we just need to make sure that if a councilor wants to put that on, if there's I said, Dennis, I have no problem putting it on there, and to see if the council has any type of appetite to move forward. We move forward with it, and if not, then we don't. Okay?
Okay.
So I would ask you just to give us a quick brief overview. We don't need to talk about, I know how passionate you are about it, about formulas and anything else, so. The Council of Toronto,
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
you're welcome.
We just had the reassessment for tax purposes, and I've been inquiring with George, our tax assessor, and Sean, and saying, you know, how are you actually coming up with these assessments? And there's this calculation that I was given that determines how they determined our assessment. I said, My property's 182 Tuckerman Ave. It's my rental property. It's assessed at 50% of what the true sale value would be of the property. I said, how did you come up with that? Because Vision Appraisal, when I talked to them, they said, this is what you could sell your house for. I said, I know I could sell it for that, but I wouldn't because it's 50% of what the true sale value would be. So how do you come up with these numbers? So I'd like that, you know, we do agree to have a session, to have Vision Appraisal come and explain to us how they reassess people's properties for tax purposes. One of the things I found on here was they depreciate your property. And I have a cottage that was built in '32 on my property. And I had to water damage to it. I got a building permit, so 3 years ago, I made it almost brand new on the inside. Well, when they did the calculation, they have it completely depreciated and no sign of anything being worked on in the house. That's just an example of my house. I think that's across the town in regards to us really understanding what people have in their homes. So that's just one area that I've been inquisitive about. People have come to me and asked me, how is my assessment calculated? And I try to explain it to them, and I just thought we'd leave that up to the experts to do that. I've been listening to the short-term rental conversations. I'm the chairperson on the Affordable Housing Committee, and it keeps coming back to too much taxes. The assessments are not affordable. You know, the housing is not affordable. So it just keeps coming around. And we need to do something to help people stay in their homes longer and not be forced out based on who moves next door. They should be tied to what the town needs. Someone's taxes should not go up 20% in 3 years when the town average is 2%. So it's just, to me, there's things that we have to look at here as the system as a whole. It's not just one gleaming thing that's with the system. The current system works in the Midwest because there's a ton of land. There's no rivalry for a piece of land. There's lots of land. So not one house is super bigger than the other house. But here on an island, we're running out of land, as Mrs. Santos says all the time. And they're coming in and they're investing millions of dollars in our neighborhoods, and it's having a negative impact on people who are on fixed incomes or people who have been living here for decades. So we need to do something about it. I think I have a good proposal for that. I had a Model 3, which we all sat through and listened to the state come down and give us their understanding of the actual models that we were proposing. So I know Terry also has some tax considerations in regards to a program there. So I just like to see if there's an appetite for the council to form a workshop to take a look at this issue and determine, you know, if there is anything we can do.
Okay. Mrs. Santos?
Yes. Mr. Toronto, you bring up a good point, especially on my street. The land across the street has been sold, and from what I've been told, there are 6 house lots going across the street with water and so forth. I have been told that if you want a garage, you get the land, the house, and the house with the garage. He's going to be selling, the developer is going to be selling that particular house with the garage and the land for $1,275,000. What is that going to do to my property? Okay? I'm not going to stay in my house. Is that what you're telling me?
Your taxes will be affected by that.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Welch?
Following your lead of saying we're here to listen, I'll listen.
Okay.
I'll listen too.
Okay.
I'm very much interested.
Council Logan?
You can definitely count me in on listening to
Okay.
that.
Okay. I know where you stand, Terry. So I think we're all feeling the effects. I'm certainly feeling it in my neighborhood as well. I think that, you know, I'm all for people making money and prospering, but I think as you look across the country, there's a housing crunch, especially this type of destination. And the discussion we had, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, isn't the same discussion value-wise as that we're having to, may potentially, or we're gonna have, based on, the consensus of the council. So I don't know what the answer is, whether it's Dennis's proposal or not, but I think we have to do something, some type of Terry's proposal with the tiered tax system. It doesn't mean it just has to be one angle. It could be different proposals. I think we need to do as much as we can as possible to protect our residents, from being forced out. Because, I look at my own property, and, what's going on around me, and it's just unreal. And so it's only a matter of time before it catches up in my house as well, and my property, and my mom's old property on Green End. Horan just bought the old Francis Noon's, the upper part. I'm sure there's going to be $1 million homes there. So it's not just me, I. It's you and everyone else in Middletown that's going to be affected. And if we don't have those tough discussions and make those tough decisions at some point, whether it's, we talked about, I look at Rick, and between Rick and Dennis, and there was a lot of homesteading going back and forth with the Homestead Act that never passed. There's the Terry's tiered tax proposal. There's a lot of different things that we can do to either generate revenue, to help offset the residential tax burden, and not continue to pass it on as much to the commercial either, because there has to be that balance. And any type of other proposal that we can certainly listen to, entertain. I think, one of the issues that, Dennis, your proposal would need to overcome was, well, because of the neighborhood you live in, it was perceived as, in people's perceptions of reality, and it's not a shot at you, it was perceived as, well, he just wants to pay less and pass it on to somebody else. And that was out there. So we'll put it right on the table, and that wasn't your intention. But that's how it was perceived. So, and that's why I say the discussion now is different, because now this is trickling into a lot of neighborhoods. It started in Easton's Point with the McMansions, or whatever you want to call them, and now it's coming through Walcott and that area, and the Prospect, and Greenan Avenue, and Morrison Avenue, and it's working its way that way. So, on top of the fact that, a lot of neighborhoods going dark because of short-term rentals or investment properties, and there's not housing. So I think we need to talk about this, and you can have workshops, whatever you want to have. Let's move this along. Let's have that discussion. I think we have the information. I'm not sure how much of that information has changed in a couple of years. I don't know. As far as RIPAC, I know that I'd like to have Council Logan and Council Welch certainly get up to speed on that, because you two weren't on the council at that time when we had those long discussions. So I'm certainly always willing to listen, and I think it's the right thing to do, and we can kind of figure out where we go with this. Okay? Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's move on.
All right. So any further discussion?
So I'll get with Sean and George and just come up with a couple
Don't
dates.
kill them with emails. Just get
No,
with
just
them.
gonna get a couple of dates.
Okay.
I don't want Vision to be there, so we have to clear it
Okay.
with them.
All right.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I'll get a few dates
Yeah.
circulated amongst the committee, the council, and
Yep.
then we'll pick a date and we'll go.
Fair enough. Because that's going to be something we're going to have to talk at a special meeting. That's not something we're going to be able to talk at, have at a regular meeting, because we'll never get anything accomplished, okay? So we have a motion to second to receive that communication, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Number 23, communication of Council of Toronto in reference to Middletown fees for services.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second?
We have a motion to second to receive, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Council of Toronto.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I was talking with Paul, actually, and this started to come to light when we were looking at the campground. At one point, we were looking to put parking in there, and then we realized how much we were actually charging for, the summer down there, and we realized, wow, maybe we need to adjust this. And I think we started exploring also with the police and the services,
Yeah.
the fees. Sean's gonna look into
Yeah.
other communities, but we hadn't changed that fee in over 10 years. So I know we got a lot of fees that we get, you get service for fees.
Yep.
I wanted them to maybe educate us more on all these fees and when is the last time we updated them and are they up to speed, for what
So
we're offering.
continuation.
So I thought Sean might be here with some of the documents, but I can table this to the next meeting,
Yes, good.
and when Sean's here.
I'm not sure we need to table it. I would just make a motion to just have the administrator review the fees
Okay.
that you're referring to and let them get back to us. No sense of going on. It's the information you're gonna be looking for anyway.
I'll
You
second that.
agree with that?
Yep.
Okay,
I'll second your motion.
okay. So I'll make that in the form of a motion.
So do
Re-
you want all fees that are within the town ordinance? Is that what you're looking for?
It's his request. You have to ask him.
Yes.
All fees within the town ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to be specific so that
Yeah, I
We-
would hope,
we-
maybe we have a list of them. I'm not looking for,
we have a fee schedule.
yeah. that'd
Yeah,
be
there's a
great.
fee schedule and
In the ordinance.
I wouldn't expect that for at least 30 days.
Yeah, that's fine.
Couple of 2-3 meetings, whatever it is,
Sure.
okay?
Yeah.
Let Sean tell us when he can come back and prepare that.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, so we had a motion second to receive, and we received that, so, we made a motion now, that's right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, excellent. Apologize for confusing you. Okay, so Town Administrator, let's move on to number 24. We do have the Acting Public Works Director, Bob Hanley, here for this. Number 24, Memorandum of Finance Director through Town Administrator in reference to equipment purchases, Public Works vehicle replacement.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second?
We have a motion second to receive, all in favor?
Aye.
And we'll move right on to the resolution, if you don't mind. Number 25, resolution of the council in reference to equipment purchase, Public Works replacement vehicle.
Motion to pass said resolution.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass that resolution. Discussion. I was talking to Bob earlier, and as you read, it was pretty cool because I actually went over to him and I said, I read it was a stainless steel body. He said yes, and he explained the way they make them now and how it creates a pocket of rust where the water and sand and stuff kicks up into the current frames, the way they design them. So they're only getting about 8 years out of a vehicle before they have to replace the frame. So it's a little bit more money, but long-term, it's probably saving money, would be my guess, so the way I see it anyway. So I think it's a sound investment, and along with that is a 3-yard stainless steel sander. And the sander is, I asked Bob, I said, only 3 yards, and he said, well, it's an F-550, that's all it can handle is 3 yards, so. Does any councilors have any questions?
I have a question.
Council Logan.
Will we even be able to take delivery of said vehicle this year, knowing that the backup with vehicles available, new vehicles?
That's a good question. Bob, can you come on up to the podium, please, and just name and your position and,
Yes, they have a truck on the lot now. We've been waiting to get this to the council
Perfect.
to be approved, so they have one on the lot.
Yeah,
ready to
just,
go.
I want to make sure, because I know right now, if you're trying to buy a new car, a used car, a moped, skateboard, everything is backed up. They're just not available, so if it's available for
There's
us,
a green one on the lot.
we need to strike while the iron's hot.
it's even green.
It's green,
Wow, that's
no
awesome.
more white.
No more white. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, any
have a
further
question.
questions? Yes, Council Welch.
Do they have two?
Well, you willing to buy
I can
one?
check.
I'm only kidding.
He was
I
gonna
mean, I would
I'm
be,
for two.
maybe it'd be cheaper, to get two.
We'll look
Why
into
don't you
it.
buy one, sir? Why don't you
sorry?
buy one? Buy one.
And donate to the town?
Yeah.
I think we have plenty of money to buy it.
Okay,
Boy,
excellent.
boy.
Okay, any further questions of Bob? That's a good question.
No, but
Yeah,
thank
based on what's going on.
Good question.
Yeah, okay. All right, Bob, thank you. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? A motion, a second to pass said resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Thank you, Bob. Good luck. Okay, boards and committees. Number 28, email communication, Middletown.
Excuse me, number 26, the
Oh.
cancellation of taxes.
All I could see is adjourn down here. I apologize. Thank you, Wendy. Number 26, communication of tax assess in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive. All in favor? Aye. And let's move on to the opposed?
I'd like this whole thing continued to the next meeting, because I would like to have the tax assessor present so I can ask him some questions.
Okay.
We already voted.
Did I drop a bomb?
How do we, no, that's not a bomb. That's just a missile.
Comment?
Yes, ma'am.
It is one entry for $110.42, but if there are outstanding critical questions,
I
that's
would like to ask my questions, please, of of the tax assessor, if you don't mind.
absolutely. No, not at all.
Thank you.
Okay. So Wendy, so we just voted on it, so somebody in the affirmative needs to reconsider?
Right, you need to reconsider if you want to,
Okay, motion to reconsider the cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents. Number
Second.
27 on the docket. We have a motion, you can't,
well,
You-
you only did, you did 26.
Yes.
27, you can just continue that.
okay,
So we don't have
So
to
it's
reconsider.
Okay.
All you did was
Right.
receive it.
Well, you did-
Okay.
Yeah.
So now
All
we
right.
just continue
So
27.
you're
So,
continuing.
okay, number 27, thank you, resolution of the council in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to pass said resolution.
You want motion to
To
continue?
continue, we're going to continue this.
I just thought we'd say no.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to continue to the next meeting.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to continue to the next meeting. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, boards and committees. Number 28, email communication of Middletown Prevention Coalition Director Lori Verderosa in reference to Rachel Channon, resigned from Youth Serving Organization Representative, and Siobhan Bogizian, resigned from Parent Sector Representative of the Middletown Prevention Coalition.
Motion to receive said email communication.
Second?
Motion to receive, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And communication of Siobhan Bogizian, reference to resignation from the Middletown Prevention Coalition Parent Sector Representative.
Motion to receive said resignation with regret.
Second?
I just have a question. There's a lot of people that resign from these committees. Is it just different sectors?
It's
It
different
always seems,
sectors, so
how many sectors do they have?
Oh,
There's a lot
they have a lot of.
There is a lot of sectors, okay. It just seems like somebody's always resigning from these, and I'm just wondering why.
A lot of times people, either they leave the job or
Okay,
they,
okay. Just had asked the question, so. Okay, motion to receive said resignation with regret. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Before we adjourn, I would just like to thank
we're just,
everybody tonight, and I'd also like to thank my fellow councilors for, having the meetings through the summer, because if you look at last meeting, we had, I think, 30 items, and tonight we had 29 items. It'd be 60 items or more at a meeting, and we'd never get through it, and then we'd be backed up for a while. So I know it's nice to have a meeting or two off, but I appreciate you getting through this and staying right up to date. We have a lot going on, and we have a lot of things coming down the pike, so,
So you actually caused it last.
okay?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.